But after we got there, Daryl did most of the driving, but we stayed at Circle City, Arizona. We stayed in their campground that night, and we used the showers, and Daryl used the swimming pool because he loved to get out and swim and that. And Cleo and I got in the swimming pool that night and had quite a ball, and it was a good time. But we weren't very far away from the Air Force Base, and the jets flew all night long, so we didn't get much rest that night. We went on to Hoover Dam, and that was a great thing to see. We drove around the dam, and the weather was just really super good and warm for us. Then in Nevada, when we got to Nevada, we stopped in Las Vegas, and we thought we'd try our luck at the slot machines. And we pulled into the Kings Row campground, and that was a place for campers and motorhomes. It was one of the nicest we'd stayed at on our trip. Then we decided we'd go. We locked up the camper and the pickup, and we decided to go down the strip. And it seemed like every slot machine that I used, I got pay on it. Everyone that Cleo and Daryl used, they lost. Come trade me, Mom. Okay, and I'd go over and get paid off of his. He'd play on mine, lose his money, the one I had. Cleo says, "Oh, trade me," and I traded him, got payoff on his, and he lost on the one I had. I told him, I says, "I think you guys have lost enough for tonight, so let's go home." Back to the camper. And we come past the dollar slot machine. I said, "I'm going to put $1 in here," and Cleo said, "You'll just lose." I said, "Well, look who's talking." So I put $1 in, and lo and behold, the bells rung, the lights flashed, and I hit a $25 jackpot. Now, 25 silver dollars come flying out. I said, "Oh, Lord, Cleo, what in the hell for Fridays have I done?" And he said, "You hit the jackpot." I said, "I didn't break it, did I?" He said, "Well, you broke it tonight, the one that's fair for tonight." And I said, "Boss and Himmel." Well, this was a guy standing behind us a ways, and he was real tipsy, and "I'll help you pick him up." And Daryl says, "No, you won't. We can do very well without you." So Daryl picked him up, and then here come the floozies with short dresses on with drinks. The drinks was on the house, and I said, "We don't drink, thank you." And not a thing. And I said, "No." And the guy behind me says, "Well, I'll take it." And I said, "Be my guest." So he got the drink that was to go to me and to Cleo and anybody else, I don't know. But we laughed. It was so funny. Before we ever hit the campground, everybody on the strip knew that I'd hit the jackpot. And we got back there. They wanted us to throw a big party and buy the drinks. And I said, "No way, I'm not using my money to buy any drinks. Forget that jazz." They called us party poopers and everything else. And I said, "My money's not going to go for that. I'll use it to buy gas." At that time, $1's worth of gas got you quite a few gallons. I said, "No way." So we were sitting around there in the camper, and the fellow that run the campground, he knocked at the door, and Cleo went to the door, and he said, "If I was you people," he said, "I'd like to have you stay," but he said, after it gets dark, or after the guys has thought of it for a while, he said, they might just up and decide to come over here and get that money from you. He says, "I couldn't maybe hold them all back until the police got here." He said, "Then it's just not wise." And so we paid him and pulled out.
Well, it wasn't $25. How much was it?
It was 25 silver dollars. They were all those silver dollars.
Oh, no.
If I had them now, they'd be worth something. I haven't got any. Oh, I take it all back. I got $1 for each one of my kids. When I die, they each have one silver dollar. They each have one silver 50-cent piece, 25-cent piece, a dime, and a buffalo nickel, and wheat penny. So they each get that. The rest of the money I have, they can fight over because that I've gotten silver, because I've just put it away for them. And Joyce knows where it's at, so I ain't going to tell nobody where it's at.
Don't blame you.
But we took off, and but we got to see Lake Powell and Lake Mead on our trip, and while we went through Fort Crawford, why they had a falls there, and it was called Bear Creek Falls, and it dropped 227 feet. And that was really something to see. When we was in St. George, we drove around the temple grounds and went through Circleville, Utah, which wasn't a very large place. And then we went to Richfield. While I was in Richfield, we drove around, and they were playing a we passed a church ball diamond and they were playing softball. And they lacked a player, and they asked Darrell if he'd come play. So Darrell went out to play. They said, "What do you play?" And he says, "I can play either infield or outfield." So they put him out in left field, and this team got up to bat, and it seemed like they had been hitting a lot of balls out in left fields and getting runs off of them before other games. And when they went out there, why, old Deadeye Pete caught all of them. And then when he got up to bat, why, he knocked a home run over their fence. And as he came in, why, kids said, "Do you play ball? Where are you from?" Darrell says, "From Idaho." And he said, "Where's that?" He says, "North of here." He said, "Do you play ball?" Darrell said, "Yep." "You play church ball?" "Yep." "Are you a good ball player?" Darrell said, "No, I'm just mediocre." And he said, "Hey, you're the first one that's ever hit a ball over that fence." He says, "All the wards that's come here to play, nobody's ever hit a ball over that fence." And he says, "You wouldn't like to move to Richfield, would you?" And Darrell said, "Nope." But we stayed there that night. And then the next day we went on to Salt Lake, and we stopped and visited with Athenopa for a while. And then we came home. Cleo was athletic director in our ward, and he said that someone had been doing his job long enough. He thought he'd better get back to it. And he said of all the callings he held in the church, he really enjoyed that one. And I enjoyed going to the games with Cleo because I kept score for the basketball and volleyball and softball games. I started keeping score for them when Franklin was 12 years old. And I retired from it 3 years ago. And I kept scores for all the basketball, softball, and volleyball games in our ward and in our state. So I had, when I worked under John Erickson in our state, why, he gave me a trophy, and it said first place volleyball, or first place scorekeeper. And I thought that was quite neat. And now I also have a hat here, and it's got scorekeeper, and it's got number 1 on it. So I thought that was pretty good to get that from him. But in the summer, that we had a fun summer of '72. And in August of '72, we went down to the Proctor reunion. It was held in Saratoga. And that's down near Lehigh, Utah. And that was the last Proctor reunion that Cleo went to. In September of '72, Cleo and I went on Labor Day weekend. We went up to Island Park in the camper. And Cleo started to cross the river bottom, and he got stuck. And boy, did we ever get stuck. He had to walk to Alpine, Wyoming to find a truck to pull us out. The fellow who ran the truck said, well, we weren't the only ones. He'd been pulling people out of that river bottom for quite a few times today. And I told Cleo, I said, well, you better travel on gravel roads, guy. We don't have the money. We can't afford to get stuck many more times. But we still had a lot of fun. Our families always got together on Christmas Eve, and we met in each from one of the family's homes. And in '72, we was to Mark and Lois Barrett's. We exchanged gifts on the Dame's Drawn, and we had something to eat, and sometimes old Santa Claus made it to the home. Now, this was the last Christmas that Cleo spent with us. For that year, we had a large tree, and I had it sitting up in the front of the north window in my front room, and I was starting to take the tree down, the decoration down off of it. Cleo was to go after some hay that day, and it was being New Year's Eve. Why, he asked me if he cared if we went up to Palisade Dams fishing, and I said no. I said, who are you going with? And he said, I'm going with John Swagger. And I said, well, you better get the hay before it gets too late so you can get back, because I said, John and his wife goes to New Year's Eve dancing. And Darrell was supposed to have got the hay the nights before, a couple of nights before, but he somehow or other didn't get home from basketball practice in time. And so Dee Raymond, which was a friend of Darrell's, said he'd go with Cleo. He always called Cleo Pop Cook, and I was Mom Cook. And so he went down to Dee's place, and he couldn't seem to make Dee hear him because Dee slept in the basement. So he came back home, and he said, I can't make Dee hear me. And then he turned to me and he says, Ruth, I love you. And I says, well, Cleo, I love you too. And then he started out the door, and he says, Ruth, I love you. And I says, well, Cleo, I love you too. So I said, but don't be too long and come back. So he finally got a hold of Dee, and they picked up Dee, and they got the hay loaded. Now Lois and I had gone really sight teaching. And we was over to Merle and Andy Jenkins' home, and about 11 o'clock I kind of shivered, and Merle said, "Are you cold?" And I said, "No," but I said, "You know that old saying where it said, somebody walked across your grave," or something like that? I said, "I just feel like something's happened or going to happen today." And Andy says, "Oh, are you superstitious?" And I said, "No, not really." And he said, "It's just superstition." And I said, "No, whatever, anyway." Well, they had the hay loaded, and Dee said that that Cleo just got a hold of the, leaned back, these hands on the steering wheel, his hands on the steering wheel. He just kind of leaned back and took a deep breath. And he said the pickup started going towards the barrel pit, and he says, I grabbed the pickup and got it stopped, and that happened in front of Clifton Roadhouse's home. And he said, I kind of laid Cleo on the seat and got out, and I run to Fulmer's. Well, Terry Fulmer saw him running, and so he went out and says, "What's the matter?" And he says, "Come quick with me and take me back to where Cleo is." He says, "Something's wrong with Cleo Cook." So Terry came back, and he left his pickup there, and they got in the car and our pickup, and Dee drove, and Terry kind of held Cleo on one side, and he drove him to the hospital. Now, there at that time was working in the LDS hospital, what it was called, by the river, and he was painting there, and the young kid that was there with him, they needed some more paint, and they had to go past the morgue or something to get it. The kid says, "Hey, I don't want to go past there," and Darren said, "Well, come on, I'll go with you." They was just going across the entranceway of the door when Dee run in. He says, "There, get a stretcher, have him bring a stretcher out and get your dad, something's wrong with him." And so they brought a stretcher out, but Darren said the minute they laid that on the stretcher, he knew he'd called his heavenly home. Craig and Carla was in California at that time on a trip with her folks. With the help of Kay's brothers and sisters, they got money for a plane ticket, and Kay and Carla come home. The people in Manan and where Cleo worked at the Fresh Pack were very good. They brought food in and so many flowers and things like that. We surely appreciate their kindness, but Wayne Poole and Sock Freeman were the first ones to my home when they found out about it. And then some of my family came up from Utah. Ath and Opal came up, and Annie and George, Mark and Paula Staker, and Dick Staker, and Jane Maida Staker, and Dorothy Proctor, Inez Whitehouse, and George and Libby Proctor. And then Cleo's family, there was quite a few of them. They came to the house, and they were here. And the day of the services, I thought it was really neat for people to come that far. It was such a cold, snowy day. And the day of the services, it was so cold going over to Grant and that. And everybody told me that Cleo had a large service, and it was sure a beautiful one. I don't even remember too much about it. But Daryl always felt, Atha and Annie stayed with me. Had their families went home, and they stayed with me. And while Atha was here, she got real sick, so Daryl took her down to her and Annie to the Idaho Falls and put them on a plane, and they flew home. But I was sure happy to have them here while they stayed here. But Daryl always felt like that it was his fault that Cleo was called to his heavenly home. And I told him, no, it wasn't. It was the Lord's wishes that he go. It took me quite a while to convince Daryl that it wasn't his fault. It wasn't anybody's fault. It was just Cleo's time.